Okay, so welcome back to the show, Dave. It's really great to see you. All right, there's so much going on right now in the world, especially in our political system. So let's just jump right into it. And I want to talk to you first about the election. You think that the American public is tuned into this race yet? Or is it just those of us who keep up with politics?
Well, first, Michael, I have to say, we haven't spoken since the trial or the verdict. And, I'm a journalist. I'm not here to suck up. But I have to say, I was impressed with your testimony and, more importantly, how you did the interviews afterwards. I know it was a hard spot to be in. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. We've been talking about this stuff for years now. We used to be on the opposite sides. We're now share some opinions. But, everyone would put a lot of pressure on how you would perform and all these, which I thought was always overhyped. You're a lawyer, you know how to handle yourself. You're not a crazy man. But nevertheless, I know it was very dramatic and somewhat maybe traumatic for you. So I don't know if congratulations is the right term here, but I was happy to see you get through it well and, have it now that thing at least be in your past.
Thank you. It's funny because I get that a lot from people, where they're not sure what's the right thing to say. And I don't have the answer to it myself, other than I get angered when I hear from, maggots, right? From these maggots that are trolling on social media platforms. You're a liar. You'll always be a liar. Everything that you said about Donald Trump at the trial was a lie. Anything that you ever say is a lie. And I find it comical, to say the least, because 12 jurors in 9 hours on a case that had 22 witnesses, 20 by prosecution, 2 by defense counsel, with 1,000 pages of documentary evidence, generally takes longer than 9 hours in order to go through to get a 34 count conviction, holding each count guilty. That's pretty good. So they could say whatever they want about me. I'll tell you one thing, like what Judge Engoron said in the civil case, that's the $500 million verdict by the New York Attorney General. Michael Cohen told the truth. The 5 words on page 43 of his decision. Michael Cohen told the truth, and I did there as well. And I thank you for that. But more importantly, let's get back to this. Do you think that the American public is actually tuned into the race, or just those of us who follow politics?
I tend to think, and this is just a rough estimate, that there are about, 15, 20 million Americans who I call are tied into the news. These are the people who watch cable, whatever cable it might be. They may watch broadcast news once in a while. I used to say subscribe to a newspaper, but may actually go to news sites, what they think are news sites. I'm not sure I count Breitbart, but I'm sure conservatives don't like the sites I write for. But nevertheless, who are and engage and donate money or are part of either to candidates or to causes. 15, 20 million people for whom this is a part of their life, and that's not a big slice of the American public. It's 1 out of 16 Americans, probably 1 out of 10 adults or so. And they obviously are somewhat close to being junkies, and they're very much engaged in all this. The rest are kind of on the periphery, and they poke in, they poke out. There may be an event, maybe a trial, maybe the debate coming up on Thursday, in which gathers their interest. And then they kind of fade back out. They don't think about it until something is put in front of them. And it's a lot easier, I think, these days than when you and I grew up to ignore politics. It used to be that, if you wanted to get the sports scores, you watched the news to, get through the news, and then you wait for the sports report or the weather report or whatever. And if you wanted the same thing with newspapers, you bought a newspaper, you may not, the front page might not have been your biggest concern, but you would flip through the newspaper stories to get to either the features or the astrological stuff or the cartoons, recipes, whatever you wanted, but you brushed against the news, right? You saw it, it was kind of put in front of you whether you wanted it or not. These days, of course, with the internet, you can totally avoid all that and go straight to what you want, whether it's shopping, celebrity news, the game section of the New York Times, connections, Wordle, whatever, and of course sports, which is a big thing, or the business news, if you want to just go straight to that. So it makes it easier for people to even avoid those more casual interactions with political news. So therefore, I think people then zoom in, zoom out. It used to be they paid attention to conventions, but conventions have become even more prefabricated and no surprises. But this year maybe whatever craziness Trump might say at the convention or picking the vice president, that might get attention. Protests at the Democratic convention about Gaza might get attention. But I do think people pop in and out, and particularly, and this is like the thing you think about with campaigns. Campaigns spend hundreds of millions of dollars in reaching people and voters. But a lot, most voters, most people who follow things already have their minds made up, right? You pay attention, you're going to know whether you're voting for Trump or Biden. The people who are not paying attention, who aren't that sure, and therefore aren't paying much attention, are just less engaged, they're really hard to reach. And so spending a lot of time and money now trying to persuade them or reach them, is difficult. They may tune in more after the summer, particularly the summer months. We all get occupied with other things. It's light out longer. People don't watch as much television. If you're using ads, they don't, they do beach reading. Again, they do more outdoor sports. They do more travel. So, that's why, the polls can be somewhat, indicative of what's happening. But in a close race, I don't think the shifts 2% here, 2% there makes much of a difference. The polls that I find most interesting are the ones that ask people, or what they think about the world in general, or what they think they know about the world. Like who spent more money, on infrastructure? Who got more money on infrastructure investments, Trump or Biden? Of course, it's Biden. $1 trillion to Trump, 0 when he was president. But yet, on a poll that came out a couple weeks ago, it was like, a 38% split. Basically, the same amount of people thought that Trump had done as much on an infrastructure investment as Biden had. And to me, those polls are interesting because they tell the campaigns, where they need to tell their story, how they need to do things. And if people really believe that, they're widely misinformed. So is there something you can do about that? So, but to finish off, I know I've been long-winded here. We're having a debate in 6 days from when we're talking now. This is going to be one of the earliest presidential debates in modern history. Neither one has even officially won the nomination. And then there's not another debate for 3 months until September. Often the debates are in the fall, and they're 2-3 weeks apart, right? So if you do poorly in one, remember Obama's first debate against Mitt Romney?
Sure.
That was a disaster for Obama. He wasn't prepared. He was smug, and Mitt Romney performed, better than expected. But I forget how many days exactly, 10, 14, 20 days later, he had another shot at it, right? And he recovered and got things back on track. This time, the debate this coming Thursday night on CNN, we'll give them a plug here, also on C-SPAN if you don't want to watch it on CNN, there won't be anything for 3 months. And to what I assume it will be highly watched, and to what degree that sort of gets people more engaged or creates a narrative that could be highly beneficial or highly disadvantageous to one of the two candidates. I don't know. And then what do they do after that? There's no way if either one of them flubs something or does something wrong or comes off poorly, they're not going to have that much attention again for a long stretch of time.
Yeah, well, we know that Trump manages to figure out how to find the attention. But the reason that I kind of asked that question is to go back to how we actually started this, right? When talking about the trial and the verdict in the New York City election, the fraud, the hush money business record trial. And the reason that I bring it up is we have heard from a large portion, almost a third of the Republican Party, who claim that they will not vote for Trump if in fact that he is found guilty, if he is a felon. In this specific case now, he is a felon 34 times over.
Yep.
So my question is, do you really think that that 30%, those that claim that they will not vote for Trump, they have been voting now consistently for Nikki Haley. They're looking for an alternate person to vote for, RFK Jr. Do you think that come election day that they will stay true to their word and not vote for Trump, whether it's not vote at all or just not vote for Trump?
You know, to me, it's not a matter of staying true to their word. We've seen, particularly with Trump, he's a good case study here, a good test experiment, how memory fades. And memory fades in our hyper-kinetic, internet-driven culture faster than it ever has. All you have to do is go back to January 6th, right? Immediately, Republican leaders said that they didn't want to have anything else to do with him. The polling showed that a lot of Republicans were upset with that day. I'm not sure they were asked the question, would you vote for Trump? But there was certainly a lot of anger within Republicans, dissatisfaction. Some people thought this had closed the door on the Trump era, and that this was something he could not come back from. I certainly thought that was, a distinct possibility, particularly in those first few weeks when you had Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell and others saying, he'd gone too far. Okay, but now, but not even now, but within a few months, he was the leading Republican, and all the other Republicans were bending the knee to him, including McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and their colleagues. And so when they say now he's been a convicted felon, when the trial is very much in their mind, and they may not do this, may not vote for him, I'm thinking even like 6 months later, 5 months later, that feeling, that emotion, that impulse, that will fade. And there is a thing, basically, we've seen this in many, 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 many elections, locally, nationally. The chicken's coming home towards the end. Things narrowed between Romney and Obama towards the end, as well as Republican voters who didn't like Romney just said, okay, I'm a Republican, I'm voting Republican. And it happens too on the Democratic side. We'll see if the Gaza thing, fits into this pattern or not. I'm a Democrat. I still have to vote a Democrat, even though I don't like Biden because of this. So I think there is certainly a number of Republicans. They voted for Nikki Haley, and they answered the poll the way you described it, who don't want to vote for Trump, where there are a number of Democrats who don't want to vote for Biden. I think that number now is probably inflated. I think when push comes to shove, when you go to vote, if you're a voter, if you're in the habit of voting, you like to vote, at the end of the day, you still end up, a lot of them still end up holding their nose and voting for their tribe, because politics have become very tribalistic. And we've seen evangelicals, rationalize votes voting for Trump. We've seen, people like Paul Ryan, rationalize people, even after the Access Hollywood tape, who said they would have nothing to do with him, then come back as well. So I think the voters that you're talking about ought to be a worry for the Trump campaign, but I would not look at that number now as the reality that will be present in November.
So then let me just expand that and not refer to Republicans at all. I always kind of use the breakdown in the country in terms of voters. 1/3 of the country are Republicans, 1/3 are Democrats, and now 1/3 are independents.
Right.
That's kind of the easiest way, even though those numbers are not right. There are more Democrats than Republicans, and there's probably a little more Republicans than there are independents. But just for simplicity purposes for my listeners.
And it's different in different states, too. But yes.
Correct. But if you basically do it a third, and a third, we already know that there's a percentage of Republicans that won't vote for Trump. But it's really the independents that are going to ultimately make the determination. Yeah. And that, with the 34 felony charges now against him, with the sexual assault on E. Jean Carroll, with the bombastic language that's coming in there, I really do believe that he has, at least, because independent is not tribal now, right? That the independent vote, much of which comes from the Black community, as well as women, that they will not vote for him for the reasons that I previously stated. And it just makes sense. And they may not like Joe Biden, but I think that Biden's comment about don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. Yeah. I thought that was really a brilliant comment for them to say, because you don't even need to talk about the almighty now. Just turn around and say, compare me to the alternative. Yeah, am I old? Sure he is. Yeah. To say that he's not old, you'd be lying to yourself. And obviously all you got to do is look at him and you realize he's old. By the way, Trump is only 2.5 years younger. However, by coloring his hair and painting his face orange, somehow or another, it gives him, I don't know, it gives him the appearance that he's not as disheveled or old or what have you. Yeah, I believe that Trump has lost the independent vote.
I think he's certainly in trouble there. I don't disagree, but also I would flip it this way, and I would say the fact after Trump's, just to focus on a few things, even putting aside his malignant narcissism and the way he comes across as a con man, after his mishandling of the pandemic and after his, trying to steal an election and lying about it, and then trying to mount a coup internally, and then, inciting a riot, and then now, basically calling the rioters patriots and promising to pardon them. I would, if you'd asked me all this a few years ago, of course, I would have said someone like that could never get more than 35% of the vote. That would just all be such big disqualifiers. Hundreds of thousands of people died on his watch. He hung out with murderous dictators. He talked incessantly about himself, and then he tried to mount a coup, and it involved violence. So the fact that he is competitive, he's after all that, to me, is like incredibly worrisome about our country, and it shows that he's still, gaining some support amongst independents. Now, of course, you raised the point about tribalism, which certainly keeps Republicans sticking with him and has less hold on independents who don't feel that allegiance or loyalty to the Republican Party. Yet still, either because of an aversion to Biden or for other things they like about Trump, or they just feel the same grievances and anger that some Republicans feel, even though they don't identify with the party, they're still sticking with him. I do think that the trials and, his erratic behavior is mostly going to hurt him.
Elevate every morning with Tommy John's Second Skin underwear, because what you put in your pants can make or break your day, and the luxurious support of Second Skin guarantees that everything will go smoothly, and we need smooth. So when you wear Tommy John, you're much more comfortable, and when you're more comfortable, you can do everything better. Tommy John's stylish and soft Second Skin underwear has dozens of comfort innovations, like a supportive contour pouch and breathable, lightweight, moisture-wicking fabric with 4 times the stretch of competing brands. With over 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5-star reviews, Guys everywhere love their Tommy Johns. I mean, that's why Tommy John doesn't have customers. They have fanatics, like this one who raves the most comfortable box of briefs ever. There's no downside. Buy one pair and you'll never want to wear any other underwear again. I mean, I've been trying different brands of trunks for the past few months while wearing a similar product for the past 3 years. Second Skin is by far the most comfortable I've ever worn, hands down. I mean, that's my opinion, hands down. They are the most comfortable. And I know because they're soft and they hold you right where you need to be. So look, I'm certainly one who wears them. I am one who recommends them. Tommy John is the way that you want to go. Plus, here's another part. Plus, your most valuable assets are always covered with Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear or its free guarantee. So get 20% off your first order right now at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. Save 20% on Second Skin at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. That's TommyJohn.com/Cohen. See the site for details.
Amongst independents, which is why I think, one strategy that Biden should have in this debate, but also throughout the campaign, is pushing Trump to be Trump, right? Letting, getting under his skin. I think we've talked about this in the past, being derisive towards him. How do you deal with a bully? You don't challenge a bully on points. You humiliate a bully. You belittle a bully. You demean a bully. And I think that, Trump takes the bait, and to the degree to which Biden or other campaign surrogates, Kamala Harris and others, can get out there and, force him to be, the erratic, narcissistic guy who can't speak in coherent paragraphs and, propose all sorts of crazy ideas and basically seem extreme, express his full extremism in terms of positions and personality, that is the key to turning off independence, particularly suburban women, including some Republican suburban women. And so, I believe this in 2020. I believe this in 2024. I think there's an easy path for Trump to win. If he just acts like a fucking normal person. If he just, if he had just handled, the pandemic with some degree of sympathy and without saying crazy stuff, he would have been reelected in 2020. And if now, because of inflation or other reasons of people worried about Biden's age, whatever, if he came in and acted more like a mensch, regular person, stopped the outrageous attacks, and wasn't the Donald Trump that we know him to be, I think he'd be hosting the victory. But as you know better than I do, he can't do that. He literally can't.
Right.
Act like a reasonable person.
He cannot. And the notion that he could is like saying if the queen had balls, she'd be the king.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's just not possible. It's not there
but
for him not to be bombastic.
The interesting thing is just that most politicians, and he likes to say he's not a real politician, most politicians are able to pretend to be what they're not in order to win. Right? They often are very good at that. I think we're lucky that he does not have that skill set. A lot of.
I also want to, but I want to push back on this though. If in fact that he acted presidential, if he acted like a normal human being, he would lose his MAGA supporters. That group of individuals, they are a group of grievance. That's all they care about, is that Donald Trump acts like an animal, that he behaves like a balaboots, that he just attacks on everything, right? They take pride. It's almost like a reality television show for them. And if in fact that he started acting presidential on the stage, if he acted normally, I think he would lose that support.
Well, the play would be wink, wink, nod, nod to his people. Like, why I'm doing this, right? Because and there are politicians who've done that, who've been able to sort of signal their extremism or whatever. Like Reagan was very good at that. Not that he has the talents of Reagan, but there are politicians who are able to keep their base, because that's usually how you win. you win the primary by going to the more partisan members of your party, and then you go back to the middle for the election. But you kind of are winking at your base and saying, you know why I'm doing this. Nixon was tremendously adept at that. But anyway, I mean, I see your point. I know why they like the abnormality and the
and I also think that you're giving too much credit to these MAGA morons, that a wink wink and a nod nod, they would actually even understand it, which I don't believe that they will. But I want to ask you this question because, we're seeing a lot of projection coming from the right. I mean, the MAGA moronic rhetoric is now accuse Biden and the Biden administration of being fascist. They're calling President Biden a dictator and saying that we are gearing up, meaning Democrats are gearing up to steal the election. That he's going to do everything within which to steal the election from Donald again. Now, you called it one big disinformation campaign. My question to you, because I agree with you wholeheartedly, it is one big disinformation campaign. What do we do on the left to combat this?
It's really interesting because, you see this in politics through the years. The smart politicians often know they don't have to win arguments; they have to recontextualize them, right? If you have a candidate, you don't even have to go with real life example. A candidate who's relatively clean, honest person versus a candidate who's not. That candidate doesn't have to prove that he's more honest than the honest candidate. He just has to make everything look dirty and low down. And this is what Trump does, bring everything into the gutter. Because then the public sort of throws up its hands and says, well, I guess they're both this way. And so, when Trump is lying all the time, 30,000 times, according to the Washington Post and the White House, and then Biden, says something that's not true, and you do a fact check. Well, Trump lied here and Biden lied there. That's all Trump needs, because then they're both liars. It doesn't matter that one guy does it, and it's the essence of his being, and the other guy is a politician who sometimes says things that's not true, but mostly gets things right. And so when this issue of who's the fascist, it's like when the left or the Democrats or just critics, experts come out and say that Donald Trump is demonstrating authoritarian and autocratic impulses. Project 2025, which I know your listeners know a lot about, would increase executive and authoritarian power, and that this is a threat to democracy and has tones of fascism, as does the rhetoric he uses when he calls people vermin and demonizes people. All they have to do is come out and say, well, we're not the only fascists in the race. We're not the only threat here. Look what Biden is doing with it. Weaponizing the Justice Department, sending out. I get emails all the time from MAGA people saying that Biden FBI agents are the Gestapo because they're arresting January 6 people. And they don't have to win the argument that we're right and they're wrong. They have to say, this is just what everyone does now. Everyone calls everybody a fascist. And what they do is they devalue the term. I wrote a piece, I don't know, a couple of years back now, maybe 2 years ago, like, should we apply the word fascism to Donald Trump? To me, it's an important question. What is fascism? How far is it? Is there a difference between fascism, authoritarianism, extremism, autocracy? Let's be precise with terms. If we say this, does it seem hyperbolic to independent voters who may hear that and say, oh, you're just being hysterical, whiny lefties? Is there a tactical value to it? But then you come along and you say, oh, everybody, Antifa, Biden, fascism, they're communists. And that's all they have to do. So the argument or the discussion or the debate over Donald Trump's authoritarianism then becomes watered down. So we're not, you call us a threat to democracy, we call you a threat to democracy. And people, we go back to what we talked about earlier, who are not as engaged, who are not reading essays in the New York reviews of books or the New Yorker or National Review or Mother Jones. They just kind of hear all this shit and it all becomes noise. Everyone's throwing this term now around.
But here's the difference. So you bring up Project.
Okay, but you asked what to do about this. And I think in some ways, it has to come from Biden and the top and just sort of make the argument on the points. here are the things. I think name calling, doesn't register as much as here are the things Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to have more power to control the Justice Department so he can prosecute his enemies. And this is what he said. He wants to take control of the federal service. He wants to control what every EPA employee does, so that he can give favors to the billionaires who he's asking for money. I think you have to sort of, you and I and others, for the audience that we have, can talk about the threat of fascism and authoritarianism. But I think to reach a wider audience, you have to focus on the things that they will find concerning, regardless of the label.
Right. And that's the point I was going to make. What I think the Biden campaign needs to do is just take the clips of Donald Trump saying it himself. You see, you bring up Project 2025. That's not Trump. That's an outside group.
Right.
Donald Trump himself has said on day number 1 he wants to be a dictator. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, and I've never heard of, I've never read of, and I don't believe I will ever see in my lifetime somebody who has the powers of a dictator on a Monday give it up on Tuesday. It just doesn't happen. Nice. You get that power, you're not giving it up. All right. Trump is the one who said he wants to rewrite the Constitution, as if he had the brain power, the acuity to do it. I think they just need to keep hammering that Trump wants to be the dictator, said so himself, wants to destroy our tripartite system of government, confer all power onto himself, and then on top of that, just keep slamming it. This is the guy who takes credit for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This is the guy who now has set women back 50 years plus. And then just keep hammering that, because I just think that it's the strongest. While, of course, you're talking about how well the U.S. economy is. But can I ask you this? Because we also spoke about the debate, and we also talk about Trump and projection. So the debate's coming up this week, and Trump is claiming, yet again, that Biden is going to arrive on the stage amped up on some sort of an amphetamine or some sort of speed so that he, doesn't look like sleepy Joe Biden. I mean, first of all, it's incredible the number of people that I have heard, and I'm not talking about, as Donald likes to call them, the poorly educated. I'm talking about people here on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, educated, Ivy League educations, that think that they're going to be pumping him up with amphetamines so that he's on. And they believe, because Trump and his people have said so, that he was pumped up on some sort of an amphetamine during both the G7 meetings that just took place, as well as the State of the Union. First of all, there's absolutely no evidence to that effect at all. But here's the question that people have also been asking me. You even think that Trump's going to show up to the debate at all?
Yeah, I mean, I know people are thinking he's going to chicken out. I think the downside of that is just so high for him, and I think the people around him know that. And I mean, I think it would be humiliating for him not to show up. So I mean, I would be surprised. This is a guy, as I read him, you know him better. He is deeply, deeply, deeply insecure. That's why he acts like a bully. Most bullies are insecure, and hates the idea of people laughing at him or believing he's weak. Often doesn't have the guts to stand up to people, but in this instance, he may be cornered and have no choice, which is why I have a story, a newsletter, my newsletter Rland. People can find it at davidcorn.com, that I have coming out in a day, in which I kind of said that I think one thing Biden needs to do at the debate is to be derisive and demean Trump. Not challenge him on facts or say you're wrong about this or that, but just find ways to make fun of the guy. People say I'm amped up on, you claimed I was amped up on drugs. Well, I can tell you this, I can sit through a trial without falling asleep. Could you? It's like, and then again, I don't have to worry about that because I'm not accused of any federal crimes. I think there are ways that he could sort of, get under Trump's skin in this demeaning, derisive fashion. And I think Trump has a very hard time taking any incoming. But, what do you think the odds are of Trump finding some bullshit excuse to not show up?
No, I think it's very low, maybe 10%. I think right now he's kind of locked in. It's not like the earlier debates in 2020 where he said, "I'm not doing this. There's no need for me to do it. I'm the Republican nominee, and I don't need to go to this debate," and so on. It didn't inure to his benefit either.
Yeah,
but I will turn around and say this: one of the reasons that people are of the mindset that he won't show up is because when the rules were being set for the debate, I don't know what they were thinking, because the rules do not inure to Donald Trump's benefit. All right, let's just go through it. There's no audience, and Trump feeds off of an audience. Yeah. All right. On top of that, they're going to cut off the mics in order to keep the candidate from talking over one another. Joe Biden doesn't do that. He didn't do it in 2020. He wasn't going to do it in 2024. That's Donald Trump over talking, whether it would be Hillary, whether it was Joe Biden, whether it was any of the Republican candidates when he was on the stage with them in 2016. He tries to bully you by talking over, making stuff. There's no mic cutoff. On top of that, there's a bigger problem for him. And this is something that's making him nervous. And I know this to be true. He has no pre-written notes. That's a real big problem for him, because Donald Trump exists for bullet points. He doesn't remember shit. And what's he going to do? Start talking about sharks? And he's going to start talking about getting electrocuted again, or windmills and killing birds? I mean, what's he going to start babbling about? And especially, as you said, and I'm a firm believer in that as well, right off the rip, Joe Biden, from the very first question, has to demean Trump. He has to go right at the jugular to throw him off, because his people, Trump's people, are telling him, you need to act presidential. You need to not be bombastic. You need to come there and defy all expectations. Very much the way that you saw fucking idiots like Ari Melber or CNN turn around and say Michael Cohen is going to come onto the stand and he's going to be bombastic. He's going to be impossible. He's going to be hard to control. He's going to destroy the prosecutor's case by going on rants and yelling and screaming. Huh? Why? Where do you come up with that? All of a sudden, everybody's a massive prognosticator on me. I'm in a court of law. Here, he's on a debate stage for the presidency of the United States. So they're trying to impart wisdom on him and saying, just act presidential. And he will try. I'm telling you, knowing him, he will. Let me finish this. He will try right off the bat. But if you do what you and I are both saying, and you go right for the jugular from the very first question, he will not be able to hold himself back. In fact, if you do the same thing on the second question and the third question, go at his insecurities, I say he walks off the stage.
Well, that'd be interesting. First, I'm going to say Ari Melber's a friend. I'll let you guys fight that out yourself. But the thing that the time cutoff, which you mentioned, which I think is probably a good thing. I also thought the other day, you know what? When you see these clips on Twitter, particularly when he goes on for 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes about electric boats and sharks or windmills or other things, you get the sense that the guy can't think in a coherent manner, right? He doesn't speak in paragraphs. He can barely get out one sentence that's connected to the next sentence. And I thought, well, if the public could actually see him go on for 4 or 5 minutes like this, that would be could be devastating. We're talking about the people who don't pay attention much, but tune in to this and see, my God, this guy, as you put it, babbles and doesn't really have a fully functioning, rational approach to anything. So I thought maybe his team thought, yeah, a 2-minute cutoff, that's not so bad for us. We don't want him speaking for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes. I mean, he'll look like he's a bombastic interrupter. Maybe this was a way to help them impose some discipline on the guy. So in some ways, that 2-minute cutoff, might actually do Trump a favor.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. It's a great read on your behalf. I certainly, in our land, I wouldn't be writing about that one. That's certainly for sure. But let me ask you this, because you recently posted that, and I quote, "The problem is not just one deranged politician, but the millions of Americans who either want what he's selling or at least find it acceptable." Why do you think that these millions of people are still following him? Why are they still with him when he says and he does things that if it was your own kid, you would punish him, give him a timeout, or maybe even give him a smack in the ass?
I mean, haven't we been trying to figure this out now for 9 damn years? We've spent such a large portion of our lives, those of us who are involved in politics, write about politics, or think about politics, trying to understand why tens of millions of Americans, buy the crap he sells. I mean, I grew up in New York. I've watched him for years. My uncle, we talked about this, Milton Goldfein, worked for him before you did as a lawyer in his real estate company, as vice president. This is before the apprentice days, when he was just kind of a bombastic developer, a little bit of a joke, but was actually building things in New York City. And then, he comes along and totally, comes with a racist conspiracy theory about Obama, changes all his positions. Everything he says seems to be a lie or self-aggrandizing remark. And, people buy it. They think that he's on their side. They think he's their champion. More importantly, they think that he cares about them. You and I both know that a lot of these people who support him, he wouldn't spend 20 seconds with if he didn't have to. And I think it's just, it comes down to the simplistic answer of him mirroring, echoing anger, grievances, cultural resentments, racism as well, that a lot of these people have nurtured, for a long time. Some grievances are real. The middle class has been fucked over by the corporate class for many years now. A lot of grievances are totally either made up or exaggerated. The idea that there's a war on Christianity in this country is completely absurd. Anybody who wants to can say Happy Christmas. And I travel across the country. I go see these mega churches with 5, 6, 7, 10,000 members, and people are allowed to live their lives the way they like. They don't like what comes out of Hollywood. We don't watch Hollywood. There are other things you can do. But for some reason, and I think there's something else. I think government, in a lot of ways, has let down a lot of the country, particularly on economic issues. And so when Democrats get out there and say we have policies, on education, on the economy, and environment, and other things, bringing like Wi-Fi, internet to rural areas, which they've done under Biden. People say they don't really believe it. They don't believe government can improve their lives. So if government can't improve your lives, what's left? You have people who yell and scream for the cultural war issues that you care about. But even having said all this, I can understand the need that people have for a champion of this sort. What I still can't understand is why they believe Trump is the guy, because he's clearly not sincere. He clearly cares only about himself. He promises the best healthcare plan ever, better than what you got and cheaper. He doesn't deliver. He talks about infrastructure week for a gazillion times and never does it. He hangs out with people who most Americans used to be detest, whether it's Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin. I mean, there's so much there are so many barriers that Trump supporters, whether they're evangelicals or whether they're just country club Republicans, have to get over to be on his side and to support him and vote for him, be proud of him. I mean, that's what I don't get. All those barriers, from his own personality, his own past, his own conduct, to his broken promises, that what drives people to ram through like a truck, like a Mack truck, to go through one of these barriers after another, and it doesn't stop. These guardrails don't stop them from joining this cult of support, is what still puzzles me to this day, as someone who is, I hate to say this, has written and covered politics for over 4 decades now. You know, I'm still befuddled. Color me befuddled.
Yeah. You know what befuddles me? What befuddles me are these millions, and I'm talking about many millions, 30, 35, 40 million MAGA morons that hear Trump talk shit like, they're coming after your guns, the Second Amendment, sexual assault. I didn't do it. I don't know this woman. The hush money. I never slept with Stormy. I never slept with Karen McDougal. Business record fraud. It wasn't me, right? It was my accountant. The gag order violation. I didn't say it. That's not what I said, right? I mean, this is just to name a very few. But here's the thing that befuddles me. Dear patriot, dear friend, right? Dear supporter, I'm being attacked because I'm protecting your Second Amendment right. Send me money. Dear supporter, dear friend, dear patriot, right? I have been accused of sexual assault, right? I don't know this woman. I've never heard of this woman. I never slept with this woman. Send me your money. And they do. Dear friend, dear supporter, dear patriot. Right? They go on, I'm being charged with 34 counts of hush money payments and business record fraud by a racist DA in New York who was put there and who has campaigned on getting your favorite president, me, Trump. Send me money. Right? Now I'm being gagged, supporter, friend, right, patriot, by a weaponized Department of Justice by Joe Biden using Judge Juan Merchan, who is a conflicted blah, blah, blah judge, who's now gagging me so that I can't speak to you. Send me money. Now, and these idiots keep sending him money.
Now, this is the thing. I hope you promote this podcast with Michael Cohen does dramatic readings of Donald Trump's fundraising emails, because I get those, and the thing I don't people, I'm on these lists because I sign up as a reporter, but I get anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20 of these a day, text messages and emails, and what you left out there is, if you send me money, I will put you in the Donald Trump Platinum Club and send you this plastic card, which means nothing. I mean, it's like, right. Or you can buy my welcome mat, or you can buy my shot glass, or you can buy this straw hat, and I want your opinion. Fill out this form and tell me if you think the Democrats are evil or not evil, and I will, use that in putting together my platform policy, which he doesn't have. And as you do that, send me $47. So it's not just grift, Michael. It's like cheap, stupid grift. It's like, I need you to sign. And if you don't do this in the next 15 minutes, this offer will expire. And
yes.
I mean, it's all the worst aspects of direct mail con artistry. And then you have all the.
I mean, you could really make this thing funny, right? But wait, there's more. If you act now, yes. Right, I'm going to send you air so that you could breathe, right? I mean, they offer nothing. They're giving you nothing. They promise you nothing, but they keep asking you for one thing and one thing only, right? Demonstrate your loyalty to Donald Trump as a patriot, a friend, a supporter, and send him your money.
Yeah. And then you have all the side gigs, the NFT, and and all the other ways he's golden sneakers, that he's just trying to
the Trumpy Bible,
Trump Bible. I mean, it is such. It is to you and me. This is what I say when we talk about barriers. There's such a transparency here. He's not even doing it subtly. It's just transparent. You are a mark for Donald Trump if you are doing this.
That's it.
And he's using this.
You are.
And this is a guy who claims he's a billionaire, but he's using your $27 to fund his legal defense because he doesn't have enough money to pay for it himself. So
or he doesn't want to, or he doesn't want to pay it himself. He likes other people to pay for his mistakes. Hey, can I go back to your newsletter, Our Land, for a second?
Of course.
Because I read your Our Land newspaper and your newsletter, and I'm extremely grateful that we actually do have smart journalism like you, right? That you actually exist and that you write this newsletter. I want to ask you, though, in your opinion, has the mainstream media been doing a good job in covering the 2024 campaign so far? And more importantly, because I don't think so, what do you think that they could be doing to do better?
Yeah, the answer, with the media, the answer is always yes and no. There have been some great stories.
Good answer.
Right?
Good answer.
There have been some great stories that the major papers have done on Donald Trump, Project 2025, his authoritarian impulses, and all that. But then at the same time, the day-to-day coverage focuses on horse racing, the polling, what's happening inside the campaign. There was and often how the stories are presented are often almost too even-handed. Like the Washington Post, here's an example that I mentioned in the newsletter recently, wrote a wonderful story about Project 2025. And the guy, Russ Vought, who's running it, Christian nationalist, how he wants to give more power to Donald Trump to implement an extremist agenda. And it was a very good story. The headline, particularly one that appeared in the print edition, said something like this, I've been pretty close, Trump ally plans for a more muscular Oval Office. Wait a second, muscular is good. Who doesn't want to be more muscular? I mean, that's not a bad thing to be. Authoritarian is not so good, autocratic, but muscular. It's like this. They can't often even present what they have with a right punch. And with Donald Trump, I remember that when he talked about rewriting the Constitution so he could stay in office, that didn't even make the New York Times. When he praised, what's his name? Hannibal Lecter. He said, what wonderful. This was like crazy. A presidential candidate, whether it was a joke or not, doesn't even matter, was giving a rambling speech and he started talking about Hannibal Lecter, what a wonderful guy he is.
You all know about the great Hannibal Lecter.
This did not make the New York Times.
Does he not understand he's not even a real person?
No.
He's a character in a movie?
It didn't make the New York Times. It wasn't part of like a poll or who's up or down, who's running the campaign, internal rivalries, where the money is being spent. Those are all okay things to cover, but they take us away. And I'll give an example that I just wrote about today, which doesn't involve Trump or Biden, but it's about Robert Kennedy. I think that, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago from Mother Jones, which I said Robert Kennedy is even crazier than you think he is. I looked at one of his conspiracy theories, did a deep dive and showed how he made things up that were, they had some antecedents in reality, but how he mischaracterized them and used them to create this convoluted conspiracy theory about COVID-19. In any event, they often say, Robert Kennedy is, sometimes pushes conspiratorial ideas, right? Well, does that sound as bad as saying he's completely nuts and crazy? But anyway, a couple of days ago, they did a whole story, the New York Times, of Robert Kennedy and how he tamed 2 ravens that were living on his property his home that he shares with actor Cheryl Hines in Los Angeles, I think in the Brentwood neighborhood. A whole piece about how he loves birds and how he tamed these ravens and now they're his pets. And they said he's a candidate who pushes anti-establishment ideas that sometimes veer towards conspiracy theory. They don't veer. They are nuts. They're conspiracy theories, and not just one. He has a whole boatload of them. I mean, this is being done because of the Kennedy mystique, but also there is just this tremendous gravitational pull within the mainstream media to go back to convention. We do feature stories in candidates. We do poll stories in there. We do horse race stories. Yeah, Trump, Kennedy, they may be more extreme than the usual candidates we have, but they keep shoehorning them into these conventional patterns of coverage. And so you'll get a great story about Project 2025 in the Times or in the Post, and then nothing for weeks on that aspect of the campaign while they continue to say, oh, how's Trump going to do in the debate? And how, Biden's going to debate? Is the age issue going to come up? And I think that doesn't accurately convey the moment at hand. If it was Robert.
See, I have a little bit of a different take. And I really want to hear your point on this. I don't think that, for the most part, the media is doing a good job in terms of covering the campaign at all. And the reason that I say that is I find that too many journalists don't fact check their work at all. They're afraid that they're going to get scooped by somebody else, by another outlet, whether it is an actual, mainstream outlet or some blogger who's got 10 million followers on it that's going to be on television talking about his article, right? They don't fact check at all. And then worse than the fact that they don't fact check, when it's wrong, there is no correction. So the lie somehow becomes the truth, and that lie somehow keeps getting promoted and regurgitated again and again and again, over and over, until you're actually battling the lie to explain to people why the lie is a lie and it is not true.
Yeah,
that's the.
Yeah, I do think there's some of that. I mean, I know the experience that you have, that brings you to this conclusion. I think a lot of I do think that the reporters at the prestige, outlets usually tend to want to be right and get things accurately. My biggest beef is what they prioritize and how they contextualize things. As I said earlier, a presidential candidate rambling about a serial killer who doesn't exist. I don't know why that's not front page news. I just don't understand why that's not.
Me too.
That should be, front page news. Donald Trump seemed totally unhinged at this rally. And I think they just look at this and it's like, oh, people know that's just Trump being Trump. And I think that does a disservice to giving an accurate characterization of the race at hand and what I would call the threat the country faces. And that they just, they don't like the idea of taking sides. It took the New York Times a long time before they would even say Trump, lied about something. They still just get drawn back to this, all we just do both sides and let people decide. But I think that's not, it doesn't serve the public, and it's not, and it doesn't give us an accurate depiction of what's going on in the world. And we'll see, we know, when at debates and things like that, that the media can often fixate on one small piece of it and miss even the bigger story. I was just for the Our newsletter issue coming out tomorrow, I was writing about this morning. I went back and looked at some of the previous debates, and you remember when Carter, the first debate between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter raised the issue that Ronald Reagan entered his political career in the early 60s. He had been an actor campaigning against Medicare and claiming that Medicare would lead to socialism and the death of freedom in America. And he made this point because he was talking about we need to improve our healthcare system now, and Reagan's not the guy to do this with this past. He made this point, and Reagan just sort of cocked his head in that charismatic way he had and said, "There you go again." implying that Carter was
Mm-hmm.
lying and making something up, or it was a desperate attack. The attack was 100% correct. No, you can go back and Reagan put out a record album, a 10-minute record, with these words saying that Medicare would destroy American freedom.
You see, David.
But everybody looked at that response from Reagan as, wow, this is masterful. There you go again. You Google best presidential campaign moments, and that's always number one. Like, this was this great retort. Reagan was lying, Carter was right, and the media completely screwed it up by thinking that he had totally beaten Carter with this one line. And so that's the type of stuff I worry about. They get that stuff wrong. They create these narratives. And then, of course, no one ever went back to your point in this instance and said, well, actually, Reagan, Carter was right and Reagan was wrong, and we should not have gone overboard like this.
I totally agree. And the point I was trying to make is just look at the hush money trial. I was on the stand for 25 hours. And the entire story that came out was what? That Todd Blanche, the sloat, right? The stupidest lawyer of all time, Trump's attorney, that he just took apart the prosecution. He just destroyed Michael Cohen on the stand with that 1 minute and 39-second issue, right? Where I claim, and I stayed true to my word, that I spoke to Donald Trump that night. Well, you couldn't have, because you were speaking to Keith Schiller. No, in fact, we showed proof that I definitely could have, and I distinctly recall that I did. But did anybody go back and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we screwed up. Maybe we jumped the shark on that one too. But they never will. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And that's the danger when you have the mainstream media, that they're so fast to want to get something out. They don't fact check. They don't give things a chance to percolate. But look, that's neither here nor there. 34 counts. That in and of itself goes to show that Michael Cohen was once again right. Will they acknowledge it? No. But I do want to say that as we now enter the hour, in the mea culpa here, the hour goes by quick. Last question for you. If you could give any advice to Democrats about how to win in November, what would it be?
I would say they need to fight more fiercely, in the sense that, Donald Trump's out there every day, and the Republicans and the Fox noise machine and the rest of the right-wing media ecosystem, putting out false narratives, sometimes deep fakes now, or even shallow fakes. They don't even try that hard to bash Biden and the Democrats as, destroying the country, incompetent, lawfare, weaponizing the government. I mean, they're out there literally every day. The members of Republican members of Congress, they all sing from the same choir sheet. It's highly and with Trump, being the conductor. And I think in some ways, Trump's, pugnaciousness, just fighting and arguing and slinging mud every day is one of his ways for his people, that he comes across as not as old as Biden. He just looks like he's, punching away every day. And I think the Democrats need to figure out how to do that, do their own version of that without being inaccurate, without using fakes, but they need to keep punching Trump in the nose. And if Biden, who's president, has to run the country and help run the world, can't do that every day, Kamala Harris, House Democrats, others need to just come out and not just push back and defend against the attacks coming in. They have to fiercely launch their own counterattacks. Again, I'm not saying throwing mud, things that are true, things that are accurate, and just get out there and with as I said earlier, with a degree of derision and demeaning, but get out there and and pivot off things that Trump and the Republicans are doing, and show that they cares. I mean, what Trump does is he seems, to his people, he gets them excited because they think he cares about them. whether that's
Right.
whether it's true or not, he performs well in that regard for that audience. I think the Democrats and Biden need to get out there and fight real hard. It's like you can't tell people you're fighting for them. You got to show people you're fighting for them. And Bill Clinton used to say, strong and wrong often beats right and weak. If they don't think you're strong, then they kind of are less interested. So I think finding ways to be fiercer is the key here.
I totally agree with you. David, thank you so much for joining me again on Mea Culpa. Thanks for making us smarter, and thanks for your incredible journalism. I have a real issue, as I said. I just don't think that they fact check. And I think one way, certainly, for the Democrats to beat Trump and the Republicans, just fact check everything that he says and do what you said. Make fun of him, because some of it is just so batshit crazy. I thank you for joining me as usual, and please stand by, because I'm going to definitely need you again over the course of the next 5 months as we get to that November date.
Okay, always great to talk with you, Michael, and I'll see you soon.
You got it.